I am going to beat you into the living death. Living death. You into the living death. To the living death.
It's really no easy transition because I feel like we have to address the biggest story in MMA right now, but it's outside of the cage, and unfortunately, it's some other dumb stuff that has to be discussed before we can go on talking about what we really want to talk about. So, I don't think you need to be any sort of Nostradamus to know the name that's about to come out my mouth. Joe Rogan, who has this exclusive deal with Spotify for his podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience. I think they paid him with like 100 million or something for this. And since he's been there, there's been a ton of controversy. It started with the COVID-19 conspiracy theorists that he's had on there and the anti-vaxxers and whatnot, and that agenda that was being pushed heavily on his platform. This then turned into, interestingly enough, an R&B artist by the name of India Ari, who, I don't know if you guys remember her. She had some pretty good hits back in the day, but she brought up on social media how Spotify pays this man so much, pays artists so little, and the included with the COVID disinformation, like racial slurs that have been very prominent on his show. There was a compilation video put together of just different times that he dropped the N bomb with the hard ER, so we can't even go with the rap excuse, the hard ER, over and over and over again. I felt like we need to address this because he is longtime UFC color commentary. And before we get into our opinions of this particular scandal or fiasco, however you want to label it, as far as the UFC is concerned, will he be there in Houston to call the fights this weekend, or and will we see him again on that broadcast?
Joe Rogan will 100% fight tonight. We will get him out of jail. No, there's no doubt in my mind that Rogan will be there. I would be surprised if there's even a UFC response. I would genuinely be surprised. I mean, it would be prudent considering what month this is, but that we know the UFC can be tone deaf about these things, leading with Michael Chandler for Black History Month. I couldn't imagine the UFC be like, oh, because how many times Dana will be like, free speech. And yeah, but free speech doesn't make you immune to consequences of the things that you say. You may not be, prohibited from saying them from a legal standpoint. You may have the right to say them, but other people also have the right to take you to task for it, right? I think that should be how it should be, at least.
Yeah, freedom of speech, not freedom of consequences. A very basic principle there, Ben. What do you think? Is Jay right? Will Joe Rogan be back on the UFC broadcast without any sort of statement from the organization?
I fully expect that he'll be there this Saturday. He'll be there, and my guess will be that not a thing will be said about it. Well, I mean, Jay kind of jokingly brought up harked back to the Jeremy Stevens situation from a decade ago, but it's worth mentioning that you hold that up as an example of how Dana White reacts to being told what he can and can't do.
That's right.
And here you're talking about not just another disposable fighter, because we found out just how much he really cares about Jeremy Stevens within the last month, but somebody in Rogan that I have the feeling he considers a personal friend. I mean, he went out of his way to say that he sought out Dr. Rogan's advice when he had COVID himself, took that good horse stuff and got all better. No, like it's the kind of hill that, Dana will fight on. My guess is that Rogan will be there as though nothing is wrong. The question is how appropriate is or is not that, because there are multiple different things going on here. For one, the COVID disinformation, and then the history of just racial slurs, and not just individual words, but just saying and expressing really regressive and inappropriate thoughts. For those who aren't familiar with the story, Spotify pulled 70 of his episodes which even
Now it's up to 110, I believe.
okay,
Wow.
as they go back through the archive, but even there's two parts to this, because Rogan did issue an apology, and for what it's worth, like I love the line, never ruin an apology with an excuse. It was mostly apology. And, if you just take the words, of his apology at face value, it was well worded and it seemed, pretty contrite as public figure apologies go. It's not for me to let him off the hook or not. Just that was my reading of it. The response of his fan base to the apology is something that is shaking my faith in humanity. And that is something that I don't know if it's fair to take Rogan to task for, other than in the indirect sense of this is the fan base you've cultivated and they're mostly fucking assholes.
I would like to ask a question, and I would like Mr. Walker to answer this for me. What is your take? What do you feel when you see the I stand with Joe Rogan, that movement, which Ben touched on, about the fans pushing for Rogan and supporting him?
Do you have to stand? He's 5'3".
The last emotion I felt seeing a lot of those responses was surprise or shock. This is exactly what I expected to happen.
You're saying this won't make your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon segment?
This will not make my I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons, unless we do it in the ironic sense. Like fans, MMA fans, and I don't want to say, as a whole, but I do want to say that there's a vocal contingent of MMA fans who have continued to express some very, very regressive, foolish, and outdated ideas. And they throw this out there as if it's gospel truth, and if it's fact, and if it's a way to pretty much discount the experiences, beliefs, and thoughts of anyone else. And that doesn't shock me in the least bit, as one of the few, Black MMA journalists that has been, on the scene in the last several years or so. Like I've felt this personally. I've gotten the dumb DMs, I've gotten the comments, I've gotten, the vitriol thrown at me simply for expressing my existence, which, of course, you guys know me, I meet that with a middle finger and a smile. In fact, I look forward to it sometimes. But I'm of different minds of this, because first before I get into my emotions and thought process related to Rogan specifically, the response from the UFC, there will be none, unless of course it comes from Disney. That's the one factor that we're not considering now. Remember, in the fiasco that led up to Jacksonville UFC 249,
the Tachi Palace, California.
Exactly. And there was this hard-nosed, this fight is going to happen and we're going to make it happen. And they went through moving mountains to get this done in the most haphazard and foolish way possible, until they got a call from Disney that said, no, this ain't the move, fam. So if someone from Disney makes that call and tells Dana or Ari Emanuel or whoever needs to be talked to in this situation, say, yeah, this guy's not welcome on the broadcast, at least Saturday. Maybe you wait till the heat dies down and you bring him back. But also too, if you're Joe Rogan, do you want to come back necessarily? This guy's had one foot out the door forever. He's made it very clear that he doesn't plan on sticking around for long. If I'm Rogan, I'm probably going to walk off with my millions and step out of the spotlight and just chill until this heat dies down. That's probably what I'm going to do if I'm Joe Rogan. Now, my opinion of this is pretty complex. First off, Joe Rogan himself, I do not believe him to be a racist person as far as I hate this race or I hate this race or I think lowly of this race. Mm-hmm. He is a comedian, and I think it's important that comedians exist in a broader sense of free speech where they can say certain things that may be deemed unacceptable, and as long as the focus isn't always on one particular group or has some sort of broader perspective attached to it that we can laugh at, I'm not too mad at it. The problem is when he has built his platform as a comedian where you have that sort of license, but you put it into these serious conversations. You put it into these serious conversations with people who are not funny, people who do not have that same sort of elbow room when it comes to what they can say and what they can get away with. You've continually had people who have been repeatedly featured on this platform who have done nothing but spew hatred, spew stupidity, spew disinformation, and this is what's overwhelmingly gotten the eyeballs on him. This is what he's built his platform off. You have to be responsible in these cases. You have to be, and you got to take you got to take your licks. If you open the door to have a buffoon sitting across that desk, you have aligned yourself with that buffoon's ideas. And if you bring that buffoon back several times over and he continues to spew this nonsense, and you continue to sit there and listen to it and feed into it, you have simply created this synergy. And now when you are under the microscope for things that you've said that sound eerily like something that one of these dummies that you've had on your platform would say as well, don't be surprised when people take it seriously. Don't be surprised when people forget that you are a comedian. Don't be surprised at all. And now take your licks. That's the bid you made. Now it's time to lie in it. I'll reiterate, I do not think that Joe Rogan is a hateful, racist, bigoted human being. I don't believe that, but I don't think he's a smart man a lot of times. I think he's a damn fool. I think he invites bigoted fools on his platform, and he sits next to them to the point where kind of hard to say for sure. And if you're blurring the lines that much, you got a real problem, bro. You got a real problem, and it's time for you to step back and evaluate the people that are in your circle. There was a time where his show seemed to have more of a broader perspective.
Yes.
There was a time where there were more variety in the guests. There was more there was more difference of opinion.
There's more of a spectrum from
exactly
Oh,
people
of
that sat
course.
across him. Yeah, we're all over the spectrum. And that time in particular, I did enjoy listening to the show just as a podcast enthusiast. I enjoyed listening to, sometimes I enjoy listening to opposite perspectives and trying to see how they think, and was there any validity to a lot of their statements. But when that's all that you put on there, and then occasionally you throw a rapper on, I'm sorry, that's just not enough. That's just not enough. And I'll tell you, man, it was particularly difficult to listen to one clip in particular that I don't know if you guys saw this on Twitter. Apparently it was long deleted from, I think from what I understand, his people deleted this before the Spotify deal. There's a clip where he's talking to someone else, and I don't remember who it was he was talking to, and he's prompting him to say the N-word. And he's prompting him to say it to prove that it's not that big of a deal. And that's what I got from that clip. It made me sick to my stomach. And I still will say that I don't think he particularly is a racist person, but you got to be smarter than that. Have we all said things that can be interpreted in a prejudiced way, or racist, or transphobic, or misogynist, or whatever the case may be? Yes, I'm sure everyone has. The difference is you probably didn't have a microphone in front of you that was going out to millions of people, millions of impressionable people that take what you say as the truth. Be smart about your platform, people. Be very smart about your platform. And if you are one of the people providing a platform like Spotify, be smart about who you're handing these $100 million checks to. And pay your fucking artists.
I think that you raise a myriad of excellent points, but one I would like to touch on is the responsibility of the host. I mean, in addition to the blatant uses of the terminology and talking about some Planet of the Apes comparison and other things like that, it's providing the platform, the mouthpiece, the ability, and we lost Ant, to facilitate people that'll come on your show, like the guy that I'm sure you probably have seen that was speaking along the lines of accepting the debate about a black gene predilection towards violence, and this one was arguing that there's a debate that black people are more prone to violence because of genetics or something like that. To allow that kind of nonsense to be on your show as an actual possible viewpoint is inherently massively problematic.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I
Sure.
didn't hear about that.
Oh yeah. Oh, it was I forget.
That's one wrinkle I missed in this.
I forgot. I'll send you the clip. It was a 30-second or so clip of Rogan interviewing a guy who was expressing the debate about that, and it was just one. It was just one of another. I mean, this has been a deluge of
excuse me for just interrupt just a little bit more. Let me revamp my stance.
Please.
Fuck him with a broomstick. If we're going to that extent, there's one thing to have differing political opinions. It's one thing to be a conservative. I don't care if you're a conservative. I don't care if you believe in smaller government and lower taxes or whatever the case may be. Have at it. But if you're spewing that sort of pseudoscience nonsense to downplay the intellect, the accomplishments, the contributions to modern civilization of an entire race, you can suck a bag of dicks, man. Like that's just not even, man, fuck him. If that's the case, fuck him.
It was Chuck Johnson who was the person that was speaking with him. It was talking about a proclivity towards violence is who Rogan brought on. And
if you're sitting across from somebody like that and you letting them on, man.
And this is a guy who is a known far right guy who has been thrown off Twitter and dropped all kinds of things. But I also used to listen to JRE. This was back in like probably before there were 1,000. So that's been several years now since I listened to it. Because I think we're up to we're coming up on 1,800 episodes. I checked, which means that if Spotify has removed over 100, that 6 or 7% of everything you've done is being pulled because of racial content. That's not just kind of an offhanded reservation. That's not just a comment. That's a pattern. If over 5% of the things of all of your broadcasts are being pulled because of racially insensitive rhetoric that you yourself are saying or your guests are saying, that makes me question not that Rogan is a hateful person, but the pieces are starting to come together. Like, again, I share your belief. I can't step to the microphone and go, yeah, Joe Rogan's a racist and hates black people. No, I can't say that. But at the same time, I don't think in my life, I'm 35 years young, I don't believe I've ever once said the N-word in my life. Because I know I would never. Why would I say that? It's not something I would have to say. I didn't really listen to rap growing up. I from New England, so I didn't really have the breadth of experience and availability to listen to the thing. And I have some family, and anyway, so I can't even fathom just casually dropping the N-bomb. And some of those video clips, by the way, you saw the Indy area compilation. A lot of them were, back in the Red Band days, and they're sitting in the couch or whatever, and Joey Diaz is sitting over there, all those kinds of things. Some of them are in like the LA studio that you could see that was like not that long ago that he said it, like months before he moved to Austin. So we're talking like within the last 2 years. So this isn't a catching somebody on Twitter for saying, what's his name? James Gunn. The director who for Guardians of the Galaxy and Suicide Squad, who got nailed many years ago for saying some, problematic things he said on Twitter. And he said they were jokes and they threw him out and stuff like that. It isn't a 10 years old, oh, this isn't who I was. It's a relatively recent kind of trend that makes me just, you kind of notice that what you said is wholly accurate at the very beginning about how the spectrum used to be wide and it has very much veered in a certain direction.
And his guests have become more, it's become more serious and more intentional and purposeful. I mean,
Correct.
back his whole shtick, because I mean, the whole structure of the show, the guests come on for long interviews
Oh,
and
yes.
they're expansive and rambling. And Rogan's, his kind of default posture towards them is it's not confrontational because
Right.
he's not there, he's not able to fact check them in the moment. So it ends up with a lot of, oh, that's interesting. You know, somebody should look
Yes.
into that, which it's one thing when the person across from you says he has a pill that can turn water into gasoline, and it's a whole different thing if it's not some like a harmless crackpot, but somebody who has an agenda and is using you as a platform. At that point, even if you're a passive participant in it, and Rogan is very much a passive participant in his own show a lot of the time,
Yeah.
it it's happening, you know, and it's happening on your platform, and you have a certain responsibility. Like what's coming out, you know, it is your product. It has your name on it. And it's very rare that he just confronts a guest and just shuts them down like directly, because, you know, that goes against the grain of what his show's always been about.
Yeah, and I think it's very important too to keep in mind like the age of the man in question here. Like when we say like where I said earlier, like yeah, we've all said something that could be interpreted as problematic at some point in our lives. No secret that I used to rap, so that was a big part of my life. Some years ago, I said some things on a couple songs that I am not proud of. Specifically homophobic slurs that I threw out there once or twice on record. I am ashamed of that. That is something that I look back on and have deep shame and regret over. Um, I also was in my teens, in my early 20s. I grew up, I matured, I, got to experience more of the world and realize, oh, that was really stupid. That was really hurtful. That was really ignorant. Do better, Anthony. How is it that a grown man can devolve it seemingly over this time? Like what Joe Rogan's what in his 50s?
It's like
54.
54.
It's like, come on now. I mean, you're in your mid 50s and this is the level of activity going on in your brain that's acceptable. I mean, I can't wrap my head around it. I cannot wrap my head around it one bit. People are supposed to get better as they age. Very simple.
And he'll be on the UFC broadcast until he decides to stop, and that's
Without a doubt.
And that's really something.
Without a doubt. Like, yeah, and MMA fans proved exactly who they were.
Right. And I'm not here again. I'm not here to go, oh, Joe Rogan should be thrown out of the UFC and his legacy should be tarnished forever. No, that's not what I'm saying. But there should be some accountability, some measure of more than a short Instagram story or video where he's apologizing and saying he should learn. I'm okay. I'm okay with that mea culpa, but I don't know what the answer is, but I believe he's working with Daniel Cormier this weekend. And I think if Daniel Cormier were sitting in the room when the recordings were going on, I think he would have probably taken issue with what Joe Rogan had said. So I feel like there's
Maybe.
Yes, okay, fair enough. But the fact that, and I think it was MMA Junkie who compiled a big list of these, which was basically the UFC fighters and former UFC fighters. I stand with Joe Rogan and the Jake Shields and Josh Thompsons of the world who were speaking up, and Tim Kennedy, by the way, noticed a trend here, all speaking up on behalf of Joe Rogan. I'm trying to figure out a way to put into words besides just don't say anything. There's nothing to gain with standing alongside Joe Rogan. UFC fighters, Joe Rogan isn't your friend. Dana White has made this clear that fighters and employers, employees, Dana isn't your friend. Joe Rogan isn't your friend. They're people you work with. So I understand you don't want to hate somebody you work with, but there's nothing to be gained by sticking up for somebody. He's not going to sleep with you, I think was the expression people always use. It's all you're doing is pointing out your own deficiencies, your own shortcomings, to say, yes, this guy is on record saying the N-word who knows how many times. I'm on his side. What? What universe is this that people can actually say that's a stance that they can support? There's a difference between I want to cancel Joe Rogan, I want him to be fired forever, versus, okay, I don't think what he said is acceptable. Why is it that fighters are so keen to try and be on the company line, so to speak, to defend Joe Rogan? I don't get it.
It's all or nothing approach that it's just not necessary. Like, it's okay. Like, if you are a fighter or a coach or whoever, and you consider yourself a friend of Joe Rogan, fine.
Yes.
But it's okay to tell your friends that they're wrong.
Yes, absolutely.
It's perfectly acceptable. In fact, it makes you a better friend.
It does make you a better friend. To say it to them personally, to say it to them publicly, it makes you a better person, I think, to be able to like, okay, The Rock. We'll go with The Rock. He was a very public thing because he was on Rogan's side, and then the N-word video came out and other things, and he said, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
My viewpoint has changed. This matters very greatly. I knew some of the things that were in context, out of context. I knew some of the things he said were problematic, but this changes my mind.
Yeah.
You know,
and he literally said, Joe is my friend and he's still my friend, but this was wrong.
Yes. Yeah. And why is that that shouldn't, okay. That should not be a controversial stance.
No.
I would bet all of the money in my wallet right now that people are flaming The Rock because of his saying that what Joe Rogan said was wrong. And I just can't wrap my head around the notion that the Josh Thompsons would be like, Joe Rogan doesn't deserve to be. Josh Thompson tweeted about it, so I'm not just picking on Josh Thompson. That
who's known to say a lot of intelligent things,
of course,
by the way.
Yeah, but not to pick on Josh Thompson, but multiple of these fighters. I mean, it's the junkie list that you can look up. That I stand with him. Some of the things he said, or to not even address the things that Rogan said, and instead speak up against this so-called cancel culture.
Oh, the woke mob and
the woke movement is trying to cancel and silence Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
No, dude. They want to, how about saying, hey, don't say those words 2 years ago. This isn't, hey, Joe Rogan is an adolescent. Maybe you should clean up your act. This is, a recent thing that he is dealing with and encountering, and increasingly encountering by the guests that he brings on his broadcasts. I just can't figure out why people need to be sycophants to Joe Rogan, of all people. Joe Rogan can say whatever. Joe Rogan can stick up for himself. I don't need to have Michael Chandler, the prolific Black History Month hero, actually actively speak up on behalf of Joe Rogan while having a black son. So you're condoning Joe Rogan saying racial slurs. Wait, what? How do you line those up? How do you reconcile your beliefs? And we shouldn't have to have this conversation at all. You know why? More fighters need to have a black belt in what, Ant Walker?
Shutting the fuck up.
Thank you.